Hey there, my name is Lexi and thank you so much for joining my channel today. If you're new here, welcome. If you are returning, then welcome back. Today I've got a book review for you and I am reviewing the book Wish in a Jar by author Arquevious Crane. He is also a speaker, a coach, and a teacher for youth and within the education system. And I actually finished this book a few months ago, but I have been very lax on getting my reviews done. So finally bringing it to y'all here, and I can't wait to share with you what I think about this book and my review of it. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you keep staying tuned.
Girl, hit that text, that mean go ahead, get fresh. Pick you up around 6, just ride cause I got the rest. You know I like that dress, them thighs don't hide them breasts. And you gon' pop your shit.
So again, the title of this book is A Wish in a Jar by author Arquevious Crane. It was copyrighted in 2017 and the page count is at about 136 pages. It's broken down into 9 chapters and there's an epilogue and a prologue. This book is about the journey of a young boy in search of his mother who battles with his internal self trying to find his way back for the sake of his family. So let's go ahead and get into the review of this book. This book pretty much starts with him waking up in the hospital right after his accident, and then it kind of rewinds and recounts the events leading up to that accident. Just different life events that happened and things that he and his family went through before the accident. And then it talks about coming to terms with the accident and being at peace with it and accepting it for what it is and figuring out a new normal after becoming a quadriplegic. The first part that I want to point out is in chapter 6 on page 78. Finally, I had to make myself stop thinking about all the questions and just focus on my new reality. I needed to formulate a plan to navigate my new normal. For a time, I was on an emotional roller coaster until I decided to just take control and focus on the things I could control in my world. By this point, I started to come to terms with the new me and what it would mean. Instead of being angry or turning away from it, I had to face it head on and deal with it, similar to how the coaches had taught us to meet our opponents on the football field. So there's so many things leading up to this part of the book that makes this particular excerpt all the more powerful. He had gone through things like, seeing his mom be abused, his mom disappeared, grandmother taking him on along with his siblings to raise them after the disappearance of his mom. And now he's sitting in this hospital after he's had yet another hit in his life of being in an accident on the football field. I think he was 16 years old when the accident happened. But despite all of the things that had happened in his life, there's this moment where I need to stop being angry. I can't be bitter. I'm choosing not to be that way. I just need to accept this and figure out, okay, this happened to me. It was just an accident. And he does say that somewhere in the book. This happened. Sometimes an accident is just an accident. Now, how do we move forward versus dwelling on the things that have made life a little difficult or have hit us really hard and made us feel like we're always struggling or suffering, right? And that's a very powerful place to be in as a person, is when bad things happen, how do you bounce back? How do you handle it? How do you process it? And how do you decide to move forward, if you decide to move forward at all? But his name is Q for short, but Arquevious, that's his full name. But Q really just, through his own actions and through what he's detailing in this book, he's letting us know, like, hey, things happen, but you can either choose to be bitter or you can choose to be better. The next part that stuck out to me and really resonated with me is still in chapter 6. So all of these are chapter 6, basically. I want to say that chapter 6 is the most lengthy chapter in here. And is this chapter 6? Hold up. Yeah, this is chapter 6. I want to say that it's the most lengthy chapter because chapter 7 doesn't come until here. Like, all of this is chapter 6. But so all of these things that resonated with me, it really hit hard in this chapter. And the next part that hit me is on page 81. I'm just going to read here. This is when he's talking to his therapist, I believe. Q, Cheryl asks, "Why is it so hard for you to share your emotions?" I I hesitated. I don't know, really. I guess I just want to handle things myself, and not worry people with all my stuff. Yeah, but you've had to be strong for so long. For your siblings, for your grandma. It's okay to let people help shoulder your burden. You don't have to carry it all yourself, She was right, I realized. In the last years, I'd grown accustomed to keeping my worries and stressors to myself. Grandma had so much on her, taking care of her missing daughter's 5 kids had to be difficult. I had just learned to handle things myself so I could stay strong for others. And this part I relate to so hard because a lot of times we will put a lot of stress and pressure on ourselves because we don't want to be a burden to the people around us. We don't want to, weigh down other people with our problems and our woes and what's going on in our lives. Even though everybody has problems, everybody goes through things. It's nothing that's unique about us. One thing that's been very comforting that I maybe heard in like some motivational talks from different speakers is the fact that we are not unique in what we go through, and we should take comfort in that because it means that somebody's gone through it and they've lived through it and they might have a solution that worked for them that may also work for us. But I definitely relate to what Q is saying here as far as like just not wanting to be a burden and trying to figure things out on our own and being so mindful of other people's problems that we end up holding on and getting into a shell and even becoming a little hardened and not showing emotion and not letting people in because we think we're protecting everybody else around us, but really it's not necessarily a strong thing to be closed off. We think if we don't let anybody in, if we don't get vulnerable with people, that it's going to be better off for everybody, but it can actually build up resentment and it makes it so that we're not as close and we're not as connected to people. So we really got to get out of that mindset of not wanting to share because those problems and holding on to those stresses, it can manifest in the body in weird ways. The next part that sticks out to me, again, this is all from chapter 6, but this next part is on page 82. I thought back to the jar that had held my innermost, deepest wish, silently tucked away in a niche near my bed. I poured out my feelings one day when I wrote my wish on a little piece of paper, folded it neatly and placed it in the little jar. More than anything, I wished for my wish to be granted and for Mom to walk back into my life. And this part I just wanted to point out because that's where the title of the book comes from, Wish in a Jar. And I actually want to ask Q, like, where is this jar in your house? Where are you keeping it? If he would even share that with me, I don't know. The next part that resonated with me is on the very next page, page 83. The fact that you're here is a blessing in itself. And the fact that you're here for your family is a huge blessing. Don't lose sight of that. It was all about perspective and recognizing what we've got in this life. For 16 years, I never really thought about how fortunate I was to simply walk. And this part hit me so hard because it's another look at when we change our perspective on things. We can either see the negative side or we can see the positive side, but it all depends on which perspective we choose to see. And like you said, it wasn't until, losing the ability to walk that you really take things for granted. We say we want to go in a certain direction, right? Well, which way do you have to look to get to that point? Which way do you have to look to travel in that direction? And when you choose to look forward versus focusing too much at the barriers that might be right in front of you right now, or even if you're too focused on looking back at some of the things that you had to go through and questioning whether or not you can make it, you can look at that even as, wow, I've gone through so much, I'm really tired, or wow, somehow I made it past all of that and I'm still here. I wonder how much further I can go. Like, those are two different perspectives, right? But if we make sure that we keep our perspective, we keep our sights on moving forward and going in the direction that we say we desire, then we learn to choose a perspective that's going to be more beneficial and is going to lead us down the right path. The next part that stuck out to me is on the very next page, on page 84. Since I'd lost that ability, the ability to walk, I really missed having the option to get up and do whatever I wanted when I wanted to do it. I hadn't been able to see that I'd had blessings all around me, but now as I sat in a wheelchair, things were crystal clear. You know, Q, Cheryl said, you're still that same comical, overt, friendly guy who can charm his way into people's hearts. That'll never change. I laughed a little as I realized that she was right. I just have to be that same guy from my chair for a little while. I certainly didn't want to end up bitter like the old man I shared a bathroom with. It was a defining moment for me and one I'd remember in the months to come. And I wish I would have picked out that story, but for some reason, I guess I just didn't. But there was like an older gentleman that he shared a bathroom with, and the guy was just very, very angry, very cranky, and it was like a direct reflection or a direct insight into how miserable life could be if we choose to focus on only the bad things all the time. Now, I'm the type of person, I don't mind people sharing bad stuff with me because I got bad stuff that I want to talk about and get out. The only thing that would irk me is like if you stay in that place for too long and if you complain about something for too long. You got 3 of the same conversation, you got 3 of the same complaints for me to be like, all right, don't talk to me about this anymore. Because within those 3 conversations, we should have come up with some kind of solution or some kind of perspective shift. But all of that to say, I actually don't mind people having that human response and having to get out the frustration or the sadness, you know. It's just about making sure you don't stay there and making sure you don't dwell there. And the old man who's a little bitter, I don't remember that any family came to visit him. I don't think he did, but it was in direct contrast to Q's situation. You know, it's like Q was trying so hard to find a little more independence, to gain a new sense of normalcy. And then you see this old man who you're sharing a bathroom with who's just angry and just not happy. And it's like, whoa, do I really want to end up like this? Do I really want to live my life with a chip on my shoulder, angry at the world all the time? No. What do we want to do about that? The next part that stuck out to me is on page 87. I was afraid. I'll admit that I was afraid of the unknown and what my future might look like. I didn't like not having control. I didn't like not knowing what tomorrow might look like for me and how I would fit into my new scary world. Still, amid my anguish, I remembered the wish in the jar at home. Thoughts of my mom scared me more than any physical pain that I currently endured, and I relied on my wish to bring her back to me. One night, as the other men in my room slept, thanks to their pain meds, I bawled for at least 2 straight hours. I hadn't cried like that since right after my mom had disappeared. I had felt like letting the tears loose hours before, but Grandma had been with me, and so I waited for her to leave. On that night, I might not have felt my legs, but in my heart, I felt every possible emotion. I was sad, scared, angry, confused, and hopeless. I questioned God and how he could possibly have let me get hurt so badly. And this part hits hard because it's like that moment where you finally allow yourself to release. Even what's crazy about this, right, is you can't find that release in front of your family because we're trying to put on a facade or we're trying to be strong for everybody else, but you really just feel like breaking down and crying sometimes, you know? So I think it is interesting that in this part of the story, he doesn't break down in front of his grandma, but in a room full of strangers, essentially, he is able to find a moment to let it all out. And who knows if they heard him crying or not. They were probably knocked out on their pain meds, like he said, but it is very interesting how we like to put on a front for certain people, especially the ones that we should be the most vulnerable with. But I definitely relate to that, not wanting anyone to see that side because it's like, we feel like it's weak, but it's also interesting, like, we're all human. Why would we hide that? And then, you know, being a little frustrated with God, like, why would you let this happen? Why we always get frustrated with God. Why do you let certain bad things happen to me? I'm a good person. I do good things. Why do these bad things keep happening to me? I know that I'm not a bad person, but being a good person does not exempt you from going through bad or tough experiences. It's just a part of life. And you know, a lot of times God will use situations in our lives to develop us in a way. The frustration just comes in because it's like, well, why? What are we doing this for? What's good, Lord? Like, we got beef? Like, what's going on? Like, what am I supposed to learn in this moment? And certain things that happen to us, there's comfort in releasing the need to know and understand. But it also is really nice when, even though the answer may not be revealed for a very long time, it is such a huge payoff when we finally do get the answer to why we had to go through certain things. And in Q's situation, right, he's a motivational speaker as well. Well, speakers got to have stories when you get on stage. Like, how are you going to connect with people? And to some people, that might not seem like a big thing to need that to connect with people. Like, why do I have to go through these crazy situations for me to relate and empathize or sympathize with people? But it makes you more real. It gives you experience. It gives you perspective. And should you choose to communicate it in an effective way to people, then it will give ears to what you have to say, and you can help a lot of people. You went through this, you did that. And not to sound too crazy, but like, man, look at your situation. And I'm sitting here complaining about my life. What's my excuse when you are doing all these great things and like you're in a wheelchair, right? It's like, there's really no excuse. And if a man like Q can get up and do all of these things, then, and he's been through all of this, what's my excuse? What's your excuse? What's any of our excuses, right? Next part that stuck out to me, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's about, sometimes accidents are just accidents. This part is on page 92. As I heard more about Anthony's story of how he'd been shot, I realized several things. I'd been blaming myself for playing football and allowing myself to be injured. But listening to Anthony, I realized that my accident had been just that, an accident. I also realized that I was right where I was supposed to be in my life's journey. And that just piggybacks off what I was saying earlier. Sometimes bad things just happen. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you did bad things and deserve bad things back. There are consequences for our actions, but sometimes things just happen. And it's up to us to decide, well, am I going to beat myself up about it? Am I going to blame myself about it? Or can I find the lesson? Can I make peace with the situation and figure out what I was supposed to learn and move on and do better for the next day that I am so blessed to have, because I woke up to live another day, which means I have another chance to get it right today. Maybe it wasn't all great yesterday, but there's always today, there's always tomorrow, God willing. The next part that really hit me and stuck with me is basically the very next page, page 94. Q, my counselor, asked me one day, "Do you feel resentment or frustration over the accident?" "Yeah, I do, but not in the way you might expect," I said. "Tell me about that." I resented that I had to figure out new ways to do every single thing in my life. And my frustration only grew, not from my paralysis, but from having to constantly think about what I wanted to do and then how to do it. Each and everything was a process that required forethought and ingenuity. Even something as simple as turning on the TV took time and effort. And I think this part of the book stuck out to me so much because you hear stories of, and I don't want to say that Q is an extreme case, but I hear stories of people who maybe they were moving too fast, they were doing too much, they were working all the time, they weren't taking any breaks, they weren't resting, and then their body just shuts down and it sits them down for however long. And hearing the frustration of, man, I can't move as quickly as I used to, or I can't do what I used to do because my body responds this way, or God makes me sit down, whatever the reason is, right? And so hearing this part, reading this part, the frustration that comes with having to think through every little piece of your life that you have to do, like just living, right? I can only imagine how frustrating that must be, how irritating that has to be, but also it must be building like patience in a way too. There's got to be an extreme lesson of patience in this particular situation, reading Q's story. And it makes me wonder, like, kids be feeling invincible. People feel invincible, especially when we're younger. And we don't really learn a lot of consequences of our actions, maybe until we get older or something really bad happens, right? And it just makes me wonder, like, what is something that I'm being slowed down for? Like, I feel like I want to move faster and faster and faster, and I just can't. I just simply can't. And I don't know why, and I'm getting frustrated because I know that maybe I should be here, or I feel that maybe I should be here. I should be on this level. I should be doing this thing. But for some reason, I have to slow down and take the long route because, I don't know, with my music, sometimes it's a budget thing. Sometimes it's not knowing the right people. Sometimes it's not looking the part, not being enough in those aspects, not wanting to do certain actions to get certain results. You know what I mean? So even though I don't physically relate to that struggle of having to learn how to do things, having a new function of my hands because my mobility is limited, having a new way to walk around and having a new way to experience life, even though I don't relate to that in a physical sense, I do relate to it, I guess I would say, in more of a spiritual and mental sense, because there are just certain things in life that we really got to slow down and think about how we are going about, how we are approaching certain things that we do in our life. And it begs the question, why are we being slowed down for this? Like, what am I supposed to learn here? What is the point of me having to move this slowly? And if patience is the only answer, then that's it. But I think that would be a big question I would ask. Like, why am I meant to slow down right here in my life? Why isn't this going as fast as I want it to? Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I like reading about people's lives and people's stories and their experiences, more so than I like reading fiction. I do like a good fiction read, but I've been on a real kick lately of self-help development and listening to other people's stories, because maybe there's something in people's stories that will help me to become a better person, a better friend, a better family member, just self-development in general. And hearing about other people's experiences and kind of comparing it to the things that I've been through, seeing how they navigate it, and then looking at it like, okay, how could I navigate this differently? Or does this shift my perspective of things? Overall, a very easy read. I felt like I was getting through the chapters very quickly, with the exception of chapter 6, just because it's the longest chapter and there's so many little gems and tidbits. Like, it's the most highlighted and the most bookmarked section in this book. I don't know if y'all can see that. Can I? It's not overly important, but yeah. The most highlights, the most bent pages, and I actually got Q to sign this for me personally, so very excited about that. Overall, I really enjoyed this book, and it helped to shift my perspective on some things in my own life and make me think about the more optimistic side of stuff. I've gone through bad things, but it could be worse. How am I choosing to move forward? How am I choosing to shift my perspective so that I have a better and more positive interaction with life? So I would highly, highly, highly recommend that y'all go check out this book. It is available not everywhere, but it's available on Amazon. So if you just search Wish in a Jar by Arquevious Crane, and I could put the information in the description box down below. But if you search that on Amazon, you can get this hard copy. I wonder if he'll do an audiobook for this one. I don't know. I'm an engineer, we can make it happen. But I really enjoyed this, and make sure you leave comments down below, or if you're listening on a podcasting platform, leave a review for this episode and let me know what you think. Did you have any takeaways? Did these resonate with you, the parts that I read out loud? Which parts resonated with you? Let me know in the comment section down below, and make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified each and every time I post a new piece of content, and leave a review for the episode. If you rate the podcast and rate it 5 out of 5 stars, I would greatly appreciate that. But thank y'all so much for joining me in the book review of Wish in a Jar by Arquevious Crane, or Q Crane. Thank y'all so much for watching. My name is LexC. Until next time, peace.
You the finest, you the flyest, the most put together man I've seen. I can't wait to see you, hold you, kiss you when we pop out on the scene. Crazy feelings, ain't no limit to the places you and I could be.